Jerry Brown Travels. Come and we'll look at Angkor Wat, one of the great wonders of the world, and how they constructed it and the building techniques that they used to get this massive temple completed. Here's a fun way to explore. Get on an elephant and just take a little ride around, and it's a great way to have a little adventure here in Cambodia. Well, we're heading over to Angkor Wat in a toot-toot here, and Jerry Brown here with Jerry Brown's Travels, and today we're in Cambodia. We're at Angkor Wat, and what I want to do is I want to show you this beautiful heritage site here. It's a wonder of the world, okay? And it's actually, people call it a temple. And what Angkor Wat means, it means city and temple. And what the king had done is he needed a place to have his remains buried. And so what it is, it's a tomb. It's not a temple. It's like the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal is not a beautiful big structure or a castle. It actually is a tomb also. So what we're gonna do, behind me here, we're gonna walk through these gates. This is the main gates coming into the temple, and we'll take a look at the grounds in here. There was a massive moat that was constructed to keep it safe from other countries invading. Now I'm going to walk up these steps, go in through the main gate here, but look at the massive wall that surrounds the whole temple itself. So you have the moat, and then you have this large wall that completely surrounds it. Now you get a glimpse in the background of the temple itself. Well, we've come through the main gate now. Now we're in the courtyard here. And behind me, what we see is actually the temple. And as I say, it's the tomb. Now remember, it took 40 years for thousands of people to build this structure. What's fascinating about this thing, only 40 years. You talk about some of the cathedrals in Europe took 200 to 300 years to build. And now this angle of the temple behind me here, I want to show you, there's actually 5 of these towers. And the way it's laid out, there's one tower in each corner of this compound. And in the middle is the main tower. And underneath is where they buried the king's ashes there. And remember, this is a representation of heaven in Hindu mythology. It's supposed to be part of a mountain. And so the peaks represent a mountain. And here's a representation of the heavens, the peaks, and the mountains. Now here what I want to show you, one of the difficult things in building a structure that's so tall as this here, as we look up, the main walls in here, go straight up. And so if you don't put in a support system or a buttress system, they'll just fall down. So what they did over here, let me show you that over here, and on the left-hand side here, this is actually a stairway goes up, but it's actually the buttress that is holding back this wall so it doesn't collapse. Now in Europe, they used a different type of a buttress system that you'll see on the different cathedrals there, but very smart, you know what I mean? Remember, this thing is like 900 years ago that they did all of this. Here's a buttress system in Europe to support some of the heavy walls. Okay, what we've done now is we've actually hiked to the very top of the platform area here. And behind me here is the main column. And this is right at the base down in here is where the king was buried. So we go all the way to the top, and then we look all the way down to the bottom here. And over here in the base is where the king was buried. What I want to show you here is I want to show you the original stone. Okay, when they needed to build this, they needed a stone. They needed a rock, to build it. They didn't have any stone quarries or anything like that around here. So they found an area where they could dig up the dirt and they could mold it into bricks. And when you look at each one of these, you can see the stone and everything that compiled this brick. And it's very rough, as I said before, and then later what they've done is they put a sandstone finish over it, and then the sandstone then was carved into all these ornate architecture features that you see as you walk around here. Now let's take a look at the layer that they put over that rough stone here. This is actually a sandstone, and you'll see that the joints right here are very tight together. They didn't use any mortar or concrete in between these joints. They took stones and they rubbed them together like this to get them so smooth that over the hundreds of years they haven't shifted. Even so, there's been earthquakes here and a lot of different weather conditions, and you'll see that the carvings are actually kept pretty much in a straight line as you look at it, because again, just the way it was structured, they didn't slip around. With mortar, it would have expanded and it would have contracted with the different types of weather conditions. And this way, it was like the Incas had done in Machu Picchu, where you couldn't even get, like a piece of paper or anything in between here. And it's lasted, hundreds and hundreds of years. So we can learn something by their technology of their time. This is a sandstone finish, and then they came back and they hand carved everything. Actually, the whole temple took 40 years to build, and this part of it took, they say, somewhere around 20 years of that 40 years to finish it off, to give it the finished look that it has now. This long corridor here is probably about 300 yards long, and it depicts the wars and the history of Hinduism and the building of the empire through wars with other tribes. You'll see elephants in here. You'll see warriors hiking along. You'll see people carrying like food because they need to feed all the soldiers and all the people. And if you see the joints in here, they're perfectly lined up. Again, remember, they use that finish that they were able to sand everything down. And over the hundreds of years, the joints were not separated. So you get these beautiful straight lines in here. This definitely will help to show you the wonder of the world. Also, what's interesting about this area here, the way the king would have seen it, it would have been all in gold. It wouldn't have looked like this. It actually, the gold over the years have worn off, but it would have been all in shimmering gold. Very beautiful. What we see here is we see nature that's taking over, because this area was abandoned, for hundreds of years, and so there wasn't anybody to care for it. As you look and you see how this ficus tree has completely engulfed this structure here, and this is what you see as you walk around the different temples, these trees that definitely have control over nature. We don't have control over nature, the nature has control over us. Here we see another example of nature taking over this temple here, and it's just amazing how powerful it is that these roots would grow over these beautiful temples over here like that. So take a look. Look how high it is and how it's just engulfed all of this here. This is definitely a wonder of the world, just to see this part of nature. What I want to show you today in this area of the temple is these columns, and because they didn't have a real sophisticated buttress system, so they didn't know how to, take the weight that would be on top of them, so their columns are very close together, and you can see that as you look down here. You see the column. Now as you look up, you'll see the structure above, so they have all this weight. So the way to solve that problem is just keep the columns very close together. And so there's little rooms as you walk around in here. There's not big open areas like you see in the cathedrals in Europe. You see the columns spaced very close together. Let's take a little walk and check out another temple. Where we're at right now, it may look like a temple, but it's not a temple. What it is, it's a crematorium. It's where all the bodies of the royal family were brought, and they would be cremated, and then their bodies would be protected because they believe in reincarnation. So they wanted their bodies and their spirits to be protected. So when they come into the new life, then they're going to be of the royal family, they're going to have power, they're going to be rich, they're going to be healthy, they're going to have all the things that we all want. And so this right here is a crematorium. Well, hop aboard because we're taking a toot-toot ride to check out another temple here. Come on, let's take a look. Don't get tired out. A lot of fun. It's an adventure. What I want to show you in here is I want to point out these are holes, and you'll see them as you walk around. And what they did is they put wood in there, and they would pour water on the wood. That would expand, and this way they could actually pick up the stones individually. Now look up at the ceiling up in here, and this, remember, was like 1,000 years ago. So they didn't have the technology that they had with the arches that normally we see in Europe. And so it's a much more of a rough type of architecture or building strategy, but it definitely works because you can see it's withheld over the hundreds of years that the structure is still standing. Behind me is a gate coming into the temple here, and along the gate there's a bridge here, and behind me here you will see these statues that actually have some heads on them. But as I walk along here, I'm going to show you they actually have been decapitated. Heads have been cut off. I understand that during the war, the Khmer Rouge, the Communist Party, would actually cut off the heads because they were representation of religious symbols like Buddha and this. And the other thing is that some of the heads were cut off because they could sell them and get some extra money. It's such a poor country here. So we'll take a look back in here, and you can see the bridge and the heavy stones that were laid, and then you walk into the temple here. Now we see the bridge before all the heads were cut off. Where we're at now, actually this is the courthouse. And again, take a look at this ficus tree, banyan tree that's engulfing this structure here. This is actually the Supreme Court. Look at the scale of this banyan tree behind me here. It's so massive. I'm like a little guy in here. Well, we've done now is we've come over to Angkor Thom, another temple here. And this is an interesting one because in the background, I'm going to show you some pictures of the different faces. There's all these faces within here. Some of them have 4 sides. There'll be a face on each side and a face on this side. So let's take a little walk around. We'll show you what Angkor Thom looks like. Now Angkor Thom, for me it's very special. We've been to Angkor Wat a few times, but somehow this area really resonates with me. The different faces, it just seems to have so much history to it. I don't know why, but hey, let's take a little walk. I'm going to show you some of the faces here and get an idea of what Angkor Thom looks like. Now in the background here, again, you can see more of the sculptures, the faces in here. They're all carved in sandstone, so they could, carve it fairly easily. It's not granite. Asia is so exotic, and it's such an adventure to come here, just to be able to go back. I always say I like going back in history. When we travel to countries where I can go 100 years, but now I'm going back 900 years. I'm able to look at these masons, these stone masons, these carvers, these craftspeople, how they've created this beautiful, beautiful structures around Angkor Wat, and we as tourists can just come here and enjoy their handiwork. Exotic Asia. So this here represents a dog or a lion. It's a protector of the stairway. Behind me here, you'll see a stairway. It leads up to a house or to part of the temple here. And the idea is that these two on the other side over here, we'll see another of the dog. It's a protector. You know, sort of think about your own dog or a dog that you know, a pit bull, you know what I mean, that guards the house. Well, this is the same concept. This is the pit bull of, you know, the early centuries of Hinduism. So it'll guard the house, protect it from the bad spirits or the bad people coming. That's what this is all about. They started building Angkor Wat in the 12th centuries, and it took them 40 years to complete. Angkor Wat total area has over 700 temples, and it's larger than Paris, France. In the 14th century, the people of Angkor Wat started leaving the area, so the area stayed dormant for hundreds of years until in the 15th centuries, the Buddhist monk came in and started to set up their temples here and pray and establish what we see today as Angkor Wat in the sense of a spiritual place, but it's the original construction. I'd like to make a suggestion to you. If you're ever traveling, you ever come across a place like this here, Angkor Wat, a wonder of the world, you know, a heritage site, anything where history is involved, take the time to do a little reading about the history of it, or do a simple thing, spend about an hour on YouTube and watch a YouTube video or two and get an idea of the history. It's going to make your trip so much more enjoyable. You'll really enjoy it and have a lot more of a story to tell when you get back. See other videos on our YouTube channel. Hey, how about following us around the world and subscribe? This has been Jerry Brown with Jerry Brown's Travels, and it's a great privilege to be able to share this with you.